You believe wealth is complicated because that belief keeps you manageable. Let me destroy that illusion in the next 20 minutes, using principles a Florentine diplomat wrote 5 centuries ago while watching families rise and fall like tides. Machiavelli understood something your economics professor never will. The poor stay poor because they play by rules the rich never follow. They recite these rules in public, of course. They give commencement speeches about integrity and perseverance. Then they return to their estates built on strategies that would horrify you if you understood them clearly. The comfortable lie sounds like this: work hard, provide value, be honest, wait your turn, and prosperity will find you. It's a lullaby for adults, a psychological sedative. You've been taught that wealth is the reward for virtue, that the universe operates as a meritocracy, that good things come to those who wait. This is not wisdom. This is crowd control. It's a narrative designed to keep you productive, compliant, and conveniently out of the way, while others play an entirely different game on a board you cannot see. Machiavelli observed that men are more ready to repay an injury than a benefit. This tells you everything about human nature that your moral education tried to hide. People remember who hurt them with crystalline clarity. Benefits fade into entitlement, into expectation, into forgotten gestures. But harm carves itself into memory. The wealthy understand this asymmetry. They know that fear is more reliable than gratitude, that leverage matters more than goodwill, that strategic positioning trumps ethical posturing every single time. You've been locked inside a psychological prison where wealth building must be moral, where every dollar must be earned through suffering and virtue signaling, where taking calculated advantage feels like sin. This prison has no walls, just beliefs. You police yourself. You hesitate when you should strike. You share when you should consolidate. You play fair in a game where fairness is a handicap. The winners shed the moment no one's watching. The first principle cuts through this fog like a blade. Appear virtuous, act strategically. The prince must seem merciful, faithful, humane, religious, and upright. Notice the language. Seem, not be. Machiavelli isn't telling you to abandon morality. He's telling you that morality is a tool, not a constraint. It's armor you wear in public while your actual decisions follow a different calculus entirely. The wealthy have mastered this duality. They fund charities with names on buildings while their corporations optimize for tax avoidance with surgical precision. They speak about fair wages at conferences while their supply chains tell a different story. They position themselves as humble servants of innovation while accumulating power that would make Renaissance princes envious. This isn't hypocrisy. This is strategy. Hypocrisy implies internal conflict, guilt, cognitive dissonance. The truly wealthy feel none of this. They understand that business operates in one realm and public perception in another. Your mistake is believing these realms are the same. You think because someone preaches a value, they must practice it. They don't. They can't. Because the practices that build fortunes are rarely the ones that win applause. Look at how empires are actually constructed. Behind every billion-dollar valuation is a history of strategic ruthlessness that never makes the press release. Competitors acquired and dismantled. Markets cornered through tactics that skirt regulations. Partnerships form not from mutual respect, but from calculated dependency. The origin story you hear is mythology. The real story involves decisions that would make you uncomfortable if you examine them closely. But you're not supposed to examine them. You're supposed to admire the outcome and ignore the methodology. The mask of humility serves a specific function. It disarms. It makes you sympathetic. It prevents the kind of scrutiny that might reveal how the game actually works. When billionaires wear hoodies and drive modest cars and talk about luck, they're not being authentic. They're being strategic. They're reducing threat perception. They're making you believe they're just like you, only luckier. This keeps you from asking the questions that matter. How did they really acquire their first capital? Which regulations did they navigate around? Who did they outmaneuver? What did they sacrifice that they'll never mention in interviews? The second principle sounds simple until you internalize it. Fortune favors the bold, but boldness without timing is suicide. Machiavelli personified fortune as a woman who favors young men because they're more aggressive, more impetuous, less cautious. Strip away the Renaissance misogyny, and you find a truth about opportunity. It doesn't wait. It doesn't announce itself clearly. It appears as chaos, as disruption, as moments when the established order shows cracks. The wealthy see these cracks as doorways. You see them as risks to avoid. Waiting until you're ready is the most sophisticated form of self-sabotage ever invented. Ready is a moving target, a psychological mirage. You'll never feel ready because readiness is a feeling, and feelings are designed to keep you safe, not successful. The poor wait for perfect information. The rich act on sufficient information. The poor prepare endlessly. The rich prepare adequately and then adjust in motion. This isn't recklessness. It's understanding that the cost of delay often exceeds the cost of imperfect execution. Every moment you spend waiting for certainty is a moment someone else is claiming the territory you're studying. Markets don't reward preparation. They reward presence. They reward those who show up when opportunity is vulnerable, when competition is confused, when the old rules are breaking, but new rules haven't formed. This is when fortunes transfer, not during stability, during chaos. The poor fear chaos. The wealthy position themselves to exploit it. You've been sold a lie about risk. You think risk is binary, safe or dangerous. But certainty is the real risk. Certainty means you're operating in known territory where competition is established and margins are thin. Uncertainty is where asymmetric returns hide, where being early and approximately right beats being late and perfectly right. The psychological reframe you need is this. The appearance of safety is often maximum danger, and the appearance of danger is often maximum opportunity. The third principle will disturb you more than the others because it touches something you've been taught is sacred. Leverage fear and desire in every transaction. Machiavelli said it's better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Applied to wealth, this means understanding that every economic exchange is ultimately emotional. People don't buy products, they buy solutions to fears or paths to desires. The transaction is rational, the motivation is primal. You think emotional manipulation is evil because you've confused manipulation with harm. But all persuasion is manipulation. All marketing is emotional leverage. All sales is understanding what someone wants or fears and positioning yourself as the answer. The only question is whether you're doing it consciously or unconsciously, skillfully or clumsily, effectively or ineffectively. The wealthy do it consciously. They study consumer psychology not as theory but as engineering. They know which fears sell and which desires open wallets. They know that people will pay more to avoid pain than to gain pleasure. They know that status anxiety is more profitable than genuine need. This isn't cynicism. This is clarity. You are already being influenced by these principles every day. Every advertisement you see, every product placement, every pricing strategy, every brand narrative is leveraging your fears and desires. The difference is you're on the receiving end. The question isn't whether these tools exist. The question is whether you'll remain the target or become the strategist. The fourth law is where sentimentality dies and empires are born. Machiavelli wrote that men ought either to be indulged or utterly destroyed because they will revenge themselves for small injuries, but cannot do so for great ones. The implication is surgical and brutal. Half measures in competition create resentful enemies who will strike back when you're vulnerable. Complete dominance creates either allies or irrelevance. Look at how actual wealth is accumulated in the modern landscape. When a corporation enters a market, they don't compete gently. They operate at a loss for years, subsidizing services below cost, driving every competitor into bankruptcy, then raise prices once the monopoly is secured. This isn't anomaly. This is standard operating procedure. Amazon didn't politely coexist with bookstores. They made bookstores extinct, then moved to the next category. Facebook didn't share the social media space. They copied features, bought competitors, and made alternatives irrelevant. The poor think competition means being slightly better. The rich understand competition means making alternatives unthinkable. There's a reason every tech billionaire's internal emails eventually reveal the same philosophy. Dominate completely, or don't enter at all. Your local business owner, trying to be fair, trying to leave room for everyone, trying to leave room for everyone, trying to compete ethically. They're bringing honor to a knife fight. and they wonder why they stay local while others go global. This makes people uncomfortable because we're taught collaboration, coexistence, fair play. Those are beautiful virtues for those who've already won. For those still building, they're anchors. Machiavelli observed that the Romans, when they saw trouble coming, never let it develop but always confronted it, because they knew that delays don't eliminate problems. They guarantee the enemy chooses the timing. Applied to wealth, this means when you identify a competitive threat, you don't wait, you don't hope, you don't assume there's room for both of you. You act decisively while you have advantage. Write in the comments which law has challenged your thinking most so far. The fifth law destroys the comfortable identity you've built around your principles. Machiavelli understood that rigidity is death. He wrote that the one who adapts his policy to the times prospers, and the one whose policy clashes with the demands of the times does not. This isn't about having no values. This is about recognizing that your attachment to specific methods, to particular identities, to yesterday's strategies, these attachments will bankrupt you, while you're busy being consistent. Look at the graveyard of businesses that died defending their principles. Blockbuster had principles about physical retail. Kodak had principles about film. Taxi companies had principles about medallions and regulated markets. They all died righteous. Meanwhile, the wealth flowed to those who read the changing landscape and moved without sentimentality. Netflix had no loyalty to their DVD model. They cannibalized their own business before someone else did. Uber had no respect for how things had always been done. They saw regulation as obstacle, not gospel. The poor stay poor, partly because their identity is wrapped up in their methods. I'm a hard worker. I'm a craftsman. I'm old school. I do things the right way. These become psychological prisons. The rich have no such loyalty. They're capitalists until socialism benefits them. Then they take subsidies. They're free market advocates until they need bailouts. Then they're at the government trough. They praise disruption until they're being disrupted. Then they lobby for protection. This isn't hypocrisy. This is adaptation. This is survival. You've been taught that changing your position is weakness, that pivoting is admission of failure, that consistency is integrity. This is precisely the mindset that keeps you trapped. Machiavelli observed that a prince must have a flexible disposition, varying as fortune and circumstances dictate. The wealthy understand this intuitively. Their public brand remains consistent while their private strategies shift constantly. They'll praise manufacturing jobs while moving factories overseas. They'll advocate fiscal responsibility while leveraging debt instruments you've never heard of. They'll preach meritocracy while their children inherit empires. Your principles about how wealth should be built are luxuries you cannot afford. The market doesn't reward your values. It rewards effectiveness. Every moment you spend being consistent with an outdated strategy is a moment someone more flexible is capturing the opportunity you're too principled to see. This doesn't mean abandon ethics. It means recognize that your specific methods, your particular approach, your traditional path, these are not sacred. They're tools. And when a tool stops working, a craftsman changes tools. Only a fool keeps using a broken hammer because he's always used that hammer. The sixth law is where you stop trading time for money and start orchestrating value. Machiavelli understood that the prince never depletes his own treasury when he can use others' resources. This is the fundamental divide between those who work and those who build wealth. The poor use their own time, their own money, their own energy, then wonder why their capacity is limited. The rich have understood for centuries that leverage, using other people's money, other people's time, other people's expertise, this is the only path to scale. Every wealthy person you admire built their fortune primarily with resources that weren't originally theirs. Real estate empires are built with bank money, with investor capital, with tenant payments covering mortgages. Businesses scale with employee labor, with contractor expertise, with customer financing through pre-sales and subscriptions. Even personal brands leverage audience attention. Platform infrastructure sponsor budgets. The self-made billionaire is mythology. The reality is strategically leveraged billionaire, but that doesn't make for inspiring interviews. You've been taught that debt is dangerous, that owing others creates vulnerability, that true independence means relying only on yourself. This is precisely backwards. Debt, intelligently used, is the tool that built every fortune. The poor avoid debt because they fear obligation. The rich embrace debt because they understand arbitrage. Borrow at 4%, invest at 10%. The difference is profit built on someone else's capital. The poor see the risk. The rich see the mathematics. But leverage isn't just financial, it's temporal. Every hour you spend doing tasks someone else could do for less than your time is worth, you're choosing poverty. The wealthy ruthlessly delegate anything below their highest value activity. They don't mow their own lawns because their hour is worth more than the landscaper's fee. They don't manage their own calendars because an assistant's salary is less than the opportunity cost of their attention. They don't even raise their own children full-time because nannies in elite schools provide better leverage of their parenting hours. This sounds cold because you've been conditioned to believe that doing everything yourself is virtuous. It's not virtuous, it's inefficient. Machiavelli would recognize this immediately as the difference between those who understand power and those who perform effort. The person working 80 hours a week in their own business is not more dedicated than the person working 20 hours orchestrating others. They're just less strategic. They've confused motion with progress, effort with effectiveness. The seventh law is where you transcend transactions and build inevitability. Machiavelli observed that the best fortress is to be found in the love of the people. But for our purposes, the modern fortress is found in their dependency. This is the architecture of permanent wealth. You don't want customers, you want subscribers. You don't want clients, you want members. You don't want employees. You want equity partners whose success is tied to yours. You're building systems where others need you more than you need any individual other. Look at how the wealthiest structures operate. Apple doesn't just sell you a phone. They create an ecosystem where your photos, your apps, your accessories, your habits, everything becomes incompatible with leaving. Leaving Apple means losing your investment, relearning systems, abandoning compatibility. The switching cost becomes psychological prison. Amazon doesn't just offer products. They offer Prime membership where the sunk cost of the annual fee, plus the convenience of free shipping, plus the integration with your purchasing habits creates dependency. You don't shop around anymore, you default to Amazon. This is the subscription model of power that Renaissance princes understood. They didn't just rule territory. They made themselves indispensable. They controlled the trade routes, the military protection, the dispute resolution, the very infrastructure of survival. Removing them meant chaos, so even those who disliked them needed them. Modern wealth follows identical patterns. Platform businesses don't create products. They create marketplaces where both buyers and sellers become dependent on the platform's existence. Remove the platform, and both sides lose their connection. Employment itself is dependency architecture. The business owner creates a system where employees trade their time and autonomy for steady paychecks and the illusion of security. The employee becomes dependent on that paycheck, that health insurance, that retirement match. They tolerate conditions they'd never accept if they weren't locked in by dependency. Meanwhile, the owner extracts value from their labor, pays them a fraction of what they generate, and builds equity they'll never share. This is an exploitation. This is understanding the game. You remain poor partly because you've never built anything others depend on. You're always in the dependent position, dependent on your employer for income, dependent on your clients for projects, dependent on platforms for attention, dependent on systems you don't control. The wealthy reverse this equation. They build the platforms, they create the systems, they become the dependency others cannot escape. Your job isn't to be needed in the sense of being busy. Your job is to be needed in the sense of being structurally indispensable. Now hear this clearly. You are strategic, not selfish. You see opportunities where others see obstacles. You are the architect of your fortune, not its victim. You act while others deliberate. These are affirmations. These are recognitions of what separates those who accumulate wealth from those who wonder why it eludes them. The difference isn't intelligence. It isn't work ethic. It isn't even luck. The difference is seeing reality without the comfortable lies society wraps around wealth building. If this unlocked something in you, if you felt the uncomfortable recognition that you've been playing by rules that guarantee your loss, subscribe now. This channel exists to reveal the forbidden psychology of power and wealth that polite society refuses to acknowledge. Next video breaks down the 48 laws of power you're breaking every day without realizing it, and exactly what that ignorance costs you. Machiavelli left us with this: the lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. The question is whether you'll remain prey or become predator.